Hopkinton, Massachusetts, a town that hadn't seen a murder in years. January 2006. Rachel Entwistle has just moved into a rented house on Cubs Path. Her husband Neil, their 9-month-old daughter Lillian. They've been living here 10 days. Rachel is 27, a teacher. Friends say she lights up a room before she even speaks. Neil works in computers. Quiet, polite, the kind of husband who opens car doors and calls his wife his treasure. On a Saturday evening, friends arrive at the house for a dinner party Rachel had been planning all week. They knock. Nothing. They call her phone. Nothing. The lights are off. The driveway is empty. Rachel Elizabeth Souza was born in December 1978 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. She grew up in the nearby town of Kingston. People who knew her described the same thing, almost word for word: energy, a presence, the kind of person who changed the temperature of a room just by walking into it. She went on to study at the College of the Holy Cross. During her junior year abroad, at the University of York in England, she joined the rowing club, not as a rower, but as coxswain, the one who steers the boat, the one who calls the commands the rest of the crew has to follow. It's there, in 1999, that she meets a quiet engineering student from a working-class town in Nottinghamshire. His name is Neil Entwistle. Rachel graduates from Holy Cross in 2001. Instead of staying in Massachusetts, she goes back to England, enrolls in a teacher training program, and picks the relationship back up exactly where it left off. In August 2003, Rachel and Neil marry in Plymouth, Massachusetts. They settle in Worcestershire, England, where Rachel begins teaching English, drama, and theater studies at a Catholic high school, a job, friends say, she genuinely loves. In April 2005, their daughter is born. They name her Lillian Rose. By the middle of that year, Rachel and Neil make a decision. They'll leave England behind and start over in the United States, close to Rachel's mother and stepfather. They move in temporarily with family in Carver, Massachusetts. Then, in January 2006, they sign a lease on a 4-bedroom house of their own, in a town called Hopkinton. A new country, a new home, a baby girl, 9 months old. To everyone watching from the outside, the Entwistles aren't a family in trouble. They're a family just getting started. To Rachel's family, Neil Entwistle was the steady one, a working-class kid from Worksop, England, son of a former coal miner and a school cook, the first person in his family to go to university, where he earned a master's degree in electronic engineering. He worked in computing. He was quiet, polite, devoted, by every outward sign, to Rachel and to baby Lillian. Rachel's stepfather, Joseph Matarazzo, liked him enough to take him out target shooting, teaching Neil, personally, how to load and fire the family's .22 caliber handgun. That was the version of Neil Entwistle everyone around him believed in. But for months, behind that version, his life had been quietly coming apart. Neil had been unemployed since the second half of 2005. He never told Rachel. He never told her family. Instead, he told them he was pulling in roughly $10,000 a month from an offshore account, tied to a previous job back in the UK. That account did not exist. What did exist was more than $30,000 in credit card debt, an eBay investigation into a string of fraudulent transactions, failed online ventures, including websites built to sell pornographic content, schemes Neil had launched chasing money that never came. He had moved his wife and infant daughter into a 4-bedroom house in Hopkinton, a house they could not actually afford, a house built entirely on a story Neil was telling everyone who loved him, and a story that, by January 2006, was about to run out of road. There was no single fight that anyone overheard, no discovered affair, no custody battle, no moment anyone could point to and say, "That's when it started." The pressure on Neil Entwistle built somewhere no one else could see it, a man unwilling to admit failure to the people who trusted him most. But 4 days before the murders, that pressure left a trail. On January 16, 2006, someone sitting at the family's laptop opens a search engine and types in a question: how to kill with a knife. That same week, the search history fills with more: suicide, euthanasia. And in that same window of days, searches for local escort services, a visit to a website called Adult Friend Finder, 3 different searches, 3 different directions, a man looking all at once at violence aimed outward, violence aimed at himself, and an escape route from the marriage altogether. Investigators would later treat this not as a single decision, but as a crisis closing in from every side, playing out on a laptop in a quiet house, while upstairs, his wife and his 9-month-old daughter had no idea any of it existed. the evening of January 19th, 2006. Rachel Entwistle picks up the phone and calls her mother, Priscilla. It's an ordinary call, nothing alarming in her voice, nothing tense. They talk the way a mother and daughter talk on any other Thursday night. No one knows it yet, but this is the last time anyone in Rachel's family will ever hear her voice again. Medical examiners would later place the time of death somewhere between the early hours of January 20 and the morning that followed. Prosecutors lay out what they believe happened in those hours. Sometime before that morning, Neil Entwistle drives to the Matarazzo home in Carver, the same house he and Rachel had lived in just months earlier. He takes his father-in-law's .22 caliber Colt handgun, and he brings it back to Hopkinton. Rachel is shot once in the head. The wound is so small, from around that size, that it isn't even found until the autopsy. Lillian, 9 months old, is shot through the torso while she is in her mother's arms. The same bullet that kills her also grazes Rachel. Forensic testing will later suggest Rachel was shot from roughly 18 inches away. The gun was pressed directly against Lillian. A few hours later, Neil Entwistle buys a one-way plane ticket. Destination, England. He drives to Logan International Airport, leaves his car in the parking garage, boards a flight, alone. He doesn't call Rachel's mother. He doesn't call his own parents to tell them what's waiting in that house on Cubs Path. As far as anyone in either family knows, this is just another weekend. A young family settling into a new home, 4,000 miles from where their husband and father is about to land. The evening of January 21st, 2006. Friends arrive at the Entwistle home for a dinner party Rachel had been looking forward to all week. They knock. No answer. They wait. Nothing changes. Concerned, they call the police and ask for a welfare check. Officers arrive that night and walk through the house, room by room, and they find nothing out of place. The entire time, Rachel and Lillian are upstairs, in the master bedroom, hidden beneath a pile of rumpled bedding, as if someone had simply left the bed unmade. The officers leave. The house is marked as empty, quiet. It isn't until the following evening, January 22nd, that a second search, slower, more thorough this time, finally reaches that bedroom and pulls back the bedding. Rachel and Lillian are lying together, still, almost as if they're asleep. They have been dead for 2 days, inside a house that police had already walked through once and found nothing. For Rachel's family, the news lands like a wall coming down. Just 1 day earlier, they had still been telling themselves a softer story, that the silence from that house meant nothing more than a young family who'd gone away for the weekend, distracted, busy, fine. That story is gone now. What's left is a crime scene, a missing husband on another continent, and a town in Massachusetts that hadn't seen anything like this in years. Neil Entwistle is 4,000 miles away, inside his parents' home in Worksop, England. Investigators in Massachusetts have no way to bring him in, so they start building the case from everything he left behind. January 23, a Massachusetts State Police trooper reaches Neil by phone. The call runs almost 2 hours. It's recorded from start to finish. Neil tells the trooper he left the house around 9 that morning to run errands, came back around 11, found his wife and daughter already dead. He says he has no idea who did it. Then he says something else. He says his first instinct was to kill himself. He says he tried a knife first, couldn't go through with it, then drove to his in-laws' house, looking for a gun, to finish what the knife couldn't. That single detail sends detectives straight to Joseph Matarazzo, and Joseph confirms it. Yes, he taught Neil how to use the family's .22 caliber handgun. Forensic testing connects that exact gun to the murders. DNA matching Neil is found on the grip. DNA matching Rachel is found on the muzzle, consistent with blowback, the spray of evidence a gun catches when it's fired at close range into a body. Neil's car is sitting in the parking garage at Logan Airport. Inside it, investigators find a set of keys to his in-laws' house. Proof, sitting in plain sight, that he had access to that gun whenever he wanted it. The family laptop gives up the rest. The searches for how to kill. The escort sites. The dating service from days before the murders. All still sitting in the browser history, untouched. And underneath all of it, the money. The unemployment Neil never told anyone about. The offshore account that didn't exist. More than $30,000 in debt. An eBay fraud investigation already underway before Rachel and Lillian were even found. A financial collapse Rachel may never have known the full truth of, right up until the moment it cost her everything. Every piece investigators pull out of that house does one of two things. It answers a question about what happened inside it, or it raises a harder one about why. February 9th, 2006. British police board a London Underground train at Royal Oak Station and arrest Neil Entwistle. It comes after a detailed search of his parents' home in Worksop. At first, Neil fights extradition. He doesn't want to go back. But within days, he changes course and agrees to return to the United States. On February 15th, he's back on American soil, back in Massachusetts, the place he fled 4 weeks earlier. And the longer the case goes on, the less his own story holds together. Friends of Neil's later take the stand and describe being told different versions of the same night. At various points, Neil told them he'd called the police himself to report finding the bodies. Before he ever got on that plane, he hadn't. Investigators are certain of it. There was no call. He found his wife and daughter, and instead of picking up a phone, he booked a flight and left them exactly where they were. Then, in December 2006, almost a full year after the murders, guards at the Middlesex County Jail find letters Neil had written to his parents and his own legal team. The letters suggest he's depressed, possibly suicidal. He's moved, briefly, to Bridgewater State Hospital for psychiatric evaluation, then returned to Middlesex County to wait for trial. By the time jury selection finally begins, in June 2008, the case against Neil Entwistle isn't built on one piece of evidence. It's built on every version of his own story collapsing under the next. The phone call that never happened, the financial life he invented, the gun he returned to a cabinet 30 miles away, as if nothing had happened. There's very little left of his account that can survive contact with the facts. The trial opens in Middlesex Superior Court in Woburn, Massachusetts. District Attorney Martha Coakley leads the prosecution. Her argument is simple. Neil Entwistle killed his wife and daughter out of desperation, a man who couldn't face telling the people who trusted him that he'd failed and who chose violence, then flight, over a single honest conversation. The defense offers a different story entirely. They argue that Rachel, struggling with postpartum depression, killed Lillian and then killed herself, a murder-suicide. The forensic evidence doesn't support it. Not the gunshot residue patterns, not the location or the angle of the wounds, not the DNA blowback on the weapon, pointing to who held it and who didn't, and not one simple fact that the defense can't get around. The gun wasn't left at the scene. It was carried 30 miles away and quietly returned to a cabinet in Carver, as if nothing inside that house had ever happened. On June 25, 2008, the jury returns its verdict. Guilty. On every count. 2 charges of first-degree murder. Illegal possession of a firearm. Illegal possession of ammunition. Under Massachusetts law, there's no discretion left for the judge. The sentence is mandatory. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Neil Entwistle is sent to Old Colony Correctional Center in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. He remains there today. His appeal goes to the state's highest court and is rejected in 2012. The U.S. Supreme Court declines to hear the case in 2013, and still, his parents have never accepted the verdict. Publicly, they continue to insist their son is innocent, that Rachel was responsible for both deaths. It's a claim no piece of evidence at trial ever came close to supporting. Strip away the fraud. Strip away the searches typed into a laptop at midnight. Strip away the one-way ticket and the flight across an ocean. What's left is Rachel Entwistle, 27 years old, a coxswain who once steered a boat down a river in England, a teacher who loved walking into her own classroom, a woman who built a life she was proud of, and Lillian Rose, 9 months old, a daughter who never got the chance to build a life of her own at all. Rachel and Lillian were laid to rest together, in a single coffin, at Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts. The name on the headstone is Sousa, not Entwistle. Lillian's birth and death certificates were later changed to read, Father Unknown. It was the only way Rachel's family had left to say it. He doesn't belong to this story anymore. The Entwistle case is still talked about, almost 2 decades later, not just because of what happened inside that house. It's because of how little warning there was. A marriage, a mortgage, a Friday afternoon errand run, all of it sitting on top of something no one around them ever saw coming, until the night no one answered the door. Rachel Entwistle wanted a classroom full of students who loved theater as much as she did. Lillian Rose wanted nothing more complicated than the chance to grow up. That's what this case cost. Not a headline, not a verdict. 2 lives that ended in a bedroom on Cubs Path, in a house they'd lived in for exactly 10 days.